And when we think about holiday spending, we usually envision parties, family get-togethers, food and gifts. What we don't often think about is the cost of it all. But guess who does think about all of that? Bruce. And he's always kind enough to share his tips with us. Now, Bruce, let's talk about this year because it is going to look different.
Very different. And you kind of outlined all the bad news there. No family gatherings, no travel. The good news is it's not going to cost as much. Look, I've come up with my Zoom party outfit, and it turns out that my tree skirt doubles as a very fancy cape. And this I just dug out of the Christmas decorations. So I'm set for my whole Zoom party look, and it didn't cost me a penny. Now, I have been getting creative very, very early, but other people are waiting for me to come out and talk about what's happening this Christmas. And I'm looking at this great holiday spending survey from PwC. They found out a whole bunch of things. But first off, 57% of people surveyed have said that the pandemic is going to be a hit to their holiday spending capability for lots of reasons. And that's going to lead 45% of them to spend less. So people will spend less. There are two sides to that coin. That's some bad news, some good news.
Okay, well, I know that you've broken it down a bit depending on different groups. How's the spending going to fluctuate?
Millennials are going to spend the most, according to that survey, $1,200 versus about $1,000 for Gen X and Boomers. Kind of surprising given what they're paying for mortgage payments, but oh well. The second observation is that there's a prediction that men are going to spend more than women. But don't get too excited. A lot of the straight women out there are like, what? This is the year I'm getting diamonds. No, that is actually not what we can read into that piece of information. Sadly, it's because of what people are referring to as the she-cession. So there were millions of job losses in this pandemic, and so many of them have hit women. PwC's hypothesis is that that is why women are expecting that they're going to spend less.
Absolutely makes sense. Now, what can you tell us about what people will spend the money on if it's not diamonds?
The biggest category is gifts at about $650, $230 on non-gift items like decorations, things like that, and about $117 on other sorts of things, other non-decoration, non-gift items. That's a 5% decline versus the same period a year ago. I think it's going to be a lot worse than that, but this was the prediction from PwC back in August, and things have gotten somewhat worse since then. If you need to reduce your holiday spending, it's that $650 number. It's the gifts. You got to find a way to shrink down the amount that you spend on gifts.
Well, you know, we lean on you for money advice, but now you have to be our therapist. How do you do that? How do you cut from the gift budget?
Yeah, you got to reset expectations, and that involves communication. You do not want to wake up to, present your gift to a spouse. They're expecting a nice, expensive watch, and instead you get them an olive pitter. That is not going to go well for you in your marriage. So you got to get ahead of that, right? Not that an olive pitter is not a great gift. You got to get ahead of it with your spouse. You've got to get ahead of it with your kids. And, it really depends on the person as to whether or not you can have a straightforward conversation, like we need to cut back, or if you need to be a little more covert. Do not do this on WhatsApp. Do not do this on email. If it's your broader family, choose an ally and start having these conversations now before people have started their shopping. And it could be like, hey, Janine, how you doing? Chatty chat, chat. Remember that idea you had last year about reconsidering how we think about gifts? I know I'm totally lying. It wasn't her idea, but let's pretend that it was. And then you can hopefully get the family on side for a recalibration, because a lot of the gift giving stuff, it's not actually about tradition. It is about habit. So it's not necessarily grounded in values or really thoughtful. It's just kind of the way we've always done it. Now could be a perfect time to reset, recalibrate those habits.
Oh, that's a good silver lining right there. Now, there are, as you mentioned, Bruce, millions of people who were unemployed or are unemployed now. What advice do you have for them? Because this is probably going to be particularly tough.
Yeah. Get yourself off social media to the extent that you can, because there's going to be a lot of people in circumstances that are not yours that are bragging a lot about what they're able to spend or consume or do over the holidays. So that's a real thing to pay attention to. My advice is simple and practical and super annoying, but please don't change the channel. First is to draft a budget, the gifts, the charity, the whatever it is, the booze, all that stuff, write it all down, and then figure out a way in which you can pay for it. And for someone who's, lost their job, that may be a credit card short term. That is not ideal. And you've got to be thinking ahead to what happens in January. Because, oftentimes I hear from people in January, February, and they're like, what happened? I can tell you what happened. You went cha-ching, cha-ching, and spent money that now you don't know how you're going to pay back. So as you do that budget, you've got a total there. If you don't think you can fund it in the short term, you've got to do some horse trading and say, well, how about I don't do this, or I do this, or I don't do this, or I cut this, or I add that. It's not fun, but it's the way you have to do it.
Now, you're a realist, Bruce, which is a good thing. But even from your perspective, you're saying it doesn't need to be dire. This doesn't have to be all doom and gloom for everyone, right?
We have had so many rediscoveries of things in the last 8 months, and that really is the glass is half full way of looking at this. We've rediscovered hiking, we've rediscovered our pajamas, we've rediscovered reading and baking and all that stuff. So let's rediscover and reinvent traditions. Here's one that has been in the Sellery family since I was a kid. It's called Fruits of the Spirit. You take a Christmas ornament and you write a virtue on it. So it could be integrity, it could be passion, it could be, love. And then the one that I really need every year, and I always choose it and put it on my tree, patience.
Thanks, Bruce.